Hello and welcome to the Dublin City Development Plan pre-draft public consultation. My name is Sinead O'Donnell and I'll be your host for today's event. And I want to begin by apologising for those of you who logged in to attend this webinar yesterday. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, we had to reschedule it for today. And thank you for your understanding in that process, and particularly during these very challenging and unprecedented times. I know that Dublin City Council very much appreciates your participation in this process. This is your city, and Dublin City Council wants everyone, youth groups, older citizens, businesses, community organisations and local residents, to have your say on this city's future. This is the first stage in preparing the new Dublin City Development Plan for 2022 to 2028. And as part of this first stage, a strategic issues paper has been prepared, providing an overview of the key themes and some of the issues and challenges that are likely to be considered in this new plan, such as transport, housing, climate action, culture, and retail. Now, this webinar is focused on the theme City Economy and Retail. And the purpose of this webinar is to provide you with an overview of this theme, to hear about it, to ask questions, and to get more details before you have your say and make your submission. Now, there may be some of you here who have already read the strategic issues paper online, and some of you who may have even made a submission, while there's others here today who perhaps are engaging with this process for the very first time. Regardless of your experience, Dublin City Council's hope is that each and every one of you will log on to the website www.dublincitydevelopmentplan.ie and share your views. You'll see displayed on your screen the strategic issues paper that you can read on the website. To share your views, simply click Make a Submission, seen here at the bottom of the screen. A submission does not need to be a long report. It can simply be your ideas on how the city can be improved in the future. You can also share your views by post by writing to Development Plan Team, Planning and Property Development Department, Dublin City Council, Wood Quay, Dublin 8, and the public consultation period is open until 4:30 p.m. on February 22nd, 2021. Now, the format for today's webinar is very interactive. We'll be hearing two short presentations on this key theme, and then we'll be hosting a live Q&A session with our panel of experts on what's been discussed. On today's panel is Mary McSweeney, Deputy Head of Economic Development and Enterprise at Dublin City Council, Neil Bannon, Executive Chairman of Bannon Commercial Property Consultancy, and Erica Casey, Senior Planner at Dublin City Council. Throughout the presentations, please feel free to get involved. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see there's a Q&A facility where during the webinar you can ask questions about the new Dublin City Development Plan. And once the two presentations are complete, the panel will then be live to answer your questions, and they will endeavour to respond to as many of your questions as possible here this afternoon. We'll begin now with our first presentation. May I introduce Mary McSweeney, Deputy Head of Economic Development and Enterprise at Dublin City Council, and Mary will be discussing the city economy.
Hello, my name is Mary McSweeney and I work with Dublin City Council as Deputy Head of Economic Development and Enterprise. We're at the pre-draft stage of making the next Dublin City Development Plan. A strategic issues paper has been developed as part of the consultation process. I will introduce you to some of the issues that are captured in the city economy chapter. One of the things that struck me in looking through the issues paper is how interconnected all of the issues are and how all of them feed into a strong city economy. Dublin has a vibrant and diverse economy. It is an internationally connected city, a gateway to both the European Union and also to the United States of America. We also have strong links that are not just business links, but are also links through the personal and political. The Dublin economy is significant not only to us as a capital city, but the performance of Dublin drives the performance of Ireland. Dublin has a unique character and qualities, and these are seen in the natural beauty of our city, where we have both mountains and beaches on our doorstep, also in our heritage and culture, and we also have one of the few urban biospheres in the world. I think in recent months we've become more aware of the importance of having nature available and accessible to us, and Dublin has an abundance of offerings here, but they need to be protected. We're also competing with other international cities. These cities are competing with us for investment, for students, for visitors, and when it's safe for us to travel again. Talent is also one of the things that cities compete for, and Dublin has done well to date in attracting talent and developing talent. Quality of life is one of the factors that is important to retaining our standing as an attractive city. We're also looking to build on our reputation as a place where people wish to live, work, study and invest. And our place branding team are working hard to promote Dublin to an international audience, and also to encourage those of us based here to make the most of our beautiful city. We have challenges and opportunities that we face. Our population grew over the last census, and our population stands at 500,000 today, but it is forecast to increase by up to a further 70,000 people by 2026. Each of those individuals needs to be supported with quality and affordable housing and quality jobs. In supporting that population, we are conscious of the homes that we live in. We're spending more time in our homes of late. How well those homes are designed, how well they're insulated, how well they meet our needs are all issues that are addressed in this plan. We're also in need of ways of moving about our city in a way that is sustainable, where we have quality public transport, we'll have more people walking and cycling. We're looking to build on our public realm and green infrastructure. The parks of Dublin have never been more walked than they have been in the last few months. Also looking to how we invest in our social economy. We have a city where the prosperity is not evenly spread across all of our residents. Unfortunately, we have a number of what are called unemployment black spots in Dublin, and how can we work together to tackle that inequity? We have a growing social economy in Dublin, and the social economy has the potential to address a number of those inequities in our society. So this is an opportunity to see how this plan can support the development of our social economy. Other challenges that lie ahead are around the need to decarbonise our city economy, become greener, smarter and more digitally connected. Dublin's economy supports a thriving cluster of both Irish and international businesses, and has experienced strong growth in employment across a wide range of industry sectors. A number of these sectors have been negatively impacted by COVID. Some of the worst hit is tourism and hospitality and non-essential retail. But other sectors have managed to perform well throughout this period. We are now facing challenges not only from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also through Brexit and the need to adapt our cities in response to climate change. But we've seen pharma and professional services such as IT do particularly well, along with essential retail during this period. We have an exceptionally well-educated workforce who are English speaking, and we are seen as a business-friendly environment. And when it comes to benchmarking against other cities, Dublin has ranked second globally by FDI as a business-friendly city. Dublin is home to some of the most influential multinational companies with substantial clusters in technology. We also are strong in professional services, making us a hub for both emerging and established businesses. When we look at the jobs that are supported by tourism, hospitality and retail, we're aware that retail is the largest employer within the private sector. And when we look to Dublin city centre alone, there's over 1,500 shops operating that support 250,000 jobs. As part of an enterprise ecosystem, we also have a very strong startup scene in Dublin, and we get to work directly with those startup and scaling companies through the local enterprise office supports. But there's great collaboration between all of the stakeholders. Competitiveness is key to driving our city economy. We are recognised as one of the leading research, development and innovation locations in the world. One of the keys to that is the degree of collaboration between industry, academia and state agencies. Dublin is home to the country's top universities. A recent European Commission study confirmed that the Irish are the most highly employable graduates in the world. The Smart Docklands District is a great example of this collaboration. Launched jointly by Dublin City Council and Trinity College Dublin's Connect Research Centre, it brings together a wide range of stakeholders from across the community, multinationals, local business, from the universities and the startups, and their work collectively to address challenges that have been identified for Dublin City. And if they work here, many of these solutions can work anywhere in the world. The strategic paper identifies a number of questions to be answered in this consultation process. Some of those are looking to how the plan can support sustainable economic growth, where ongoing development should be located. And in tandem with this, how can we provide the required physical and social infrastructure? What are the key sectors that the plan should support as part of developing a strong, resilient economy? How can we address issues of economic deprivation, ensuring a better spread of economic wealth and opportunity? How can we provide orderly growth and the transformation of key regeneration areas of economic activity? How do we enhance the policies that support tourism and sustainable tourism within Dublin? How do we keep developing Dublin as a high quality, livable city and ensure international competitiveness where we continue to attract foreign direct investment, talent and visitors to our city? How can we develop the evening and nighttime economy? And how do we see the role of higher and further education, and how can that be supported through this plan? The new plan needs to support the sustainable growth of the city economy in the right locations for the benefit of all society. We need to support the creative sector and be responsive to change. The nighttime economy is one aspect of the changing demands of our city. What will that look like over the coming years? How can we make it attractive to intergenerational audiences and provide a richer variety of culture and other events? This plan can support Dublin's transition to a zero carbon economy, and it needs to continue to involve and respond to demands of businesses and residents for a greener, smarter and more connected city, where we can enjoy a good quality of life and health at all ages. We look forward to hearing your views and how we can build a plan that supports these objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Lots of great questions coming in throughout that presentation. Keep them coming in and we'll get to them shortly at the Q&A session. And just a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, you can do so at the Q&A facility seen here on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, our second and final speaker this afternoon is Neil Bannon, Executive Chairman of Bannon Commercial Property Consultancy. Neil has been in the commercial property business for 30 years. He's regarded as one of Ireland's leading retail property experts, and Neil was commissioned recently to do a retail report for Dublin City Council, which is now up on our public consultation portal, Dublin City Development Plan.ie.
Dublin City Council asked us to prepare a report on the role and function of retail within the city centre in anticipation of the upcoming Dublin City Council Development Plan. The report, in undertaking this, we looked at a complete market overview, considering the current function of retail within the city centre, the supply of retail, specific focus on the main retail areas being Grafton Street and Henry Street and their surrounds, and how they interacted with other aspects of retail in the city. We looked at the competitive threats to the retail, big focus on the big suburban schemes and the multiple smaller retail areas dotted in and around the city. What's of the makeup of customers, who was coming into the city centre, how was interacting with those customers, and where those customer bases might come from, both residents within the city, within the suburbs, and then other components of potential customers, including students, office workers, and tourists. We also then looked at micro trends affecting the sector, what's happening in retail, and what's likely to happen over the period of the upcoming development plan that might impact on it going forward. The issue of competition, both existing and future, was also considered, both within the city and in key other retail destinations that impact on the city's vitality. As part of the overall report, we interviewed a number of key stakeholders, people who invest in the city, people who are currently developing retail in the city. We would talk to retail representative groups in terms of their own view on how the sector was evolving. I think probably worth focusing on some of the key challenges. Any discussion around retail these days immediately goes to a debate about online versus traditional retailing. And we did look at that and how it's impacted on the city to date and how it's likely to impact on it going forward. There's an ongoing narrative that online retailing will dominate the sector, and perhaps retailing isn't as important as it once was to city centre's functionality. And we go into that to some degree in the report, and how what's happened over the last number of years has shown us maybe a route as to where that's going forward. Look at other changing consumer habits, which are big impacts on the sector. The rising green agenda with consumers, how they see their shopping decisions having an impact on their own environmental performance, and whether this in itself would have a changing impact on how people shop online, as that has other environmental impacts which are becoming manifest. Obviously, every discussion on retail has to take account of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been a temporary impact, hopefully, on the retail sector, but has maybe pointed towards some more permanent trends that are evident. For one, it has been a big experiment in whether people are going to stay at home and shop online. Did everyone's shopping habits immediately migrate online when they were prevented from physically going into stores? And to date, that hasn't proven to be the case, with a massive drop in aggregate retail sales caused by a pandemic and a massive increase in consumer savings, which hopefully point towards a positive environment towards retailing going forward. I think the opportunity that there is there for Dublin's retail sector is one that we were specifically focused on, especially in the context of preparing a report for an upcoming development plan. I think there is a virtuous relationship between the various sectors that pre-pandemic were thriving in Dublin. The tourism sector, where we'd seen hotel rooms doubling over the last 10 years. Office, which has seen the massive growth of Silicon Docks and the impact of very large, well-paying employers coming into Dublin City Centre and bringing a lot of employment and potential spend with them. And all of this led to a very dynamically positive relationship with Dublin City Centre, with Grafton Street and Henry Street thriving and being fully occupied. And then we looked at the opportunity that represents for Dublin City Centre going forward, how we capitalise on the opportunity that tourism, students and office workers bring to the city centre retail, how that improves the overall retail offer, and how that then makes it a more compelling place for more traditional consumer-based shoppers, suburban-based shoppers to come in and spend time in the city centre. We have some key recommendations in the report. Capitalising on the city's real experiences. One of the key takeaways from the ongoing impact of online is the need for true, real, organic experiences. People want to be wowed when they go shopping. They're not willing to just, if it's boring, they'll do it online. If it's interesting, they'll engage with it physically. And the city has a fantastic opportunity, in our view, to capitalise on its real experiences, its heritage, its architecture, its real personality, and use this to make it a more compelling retail destination going forward. We looked at some key city activity zones. There are key zones around Grafton Street, which has evolved to link with food and beverage and nighttime offers in the South City Markets area. We haven't seen the same development on the north side of the city, where Henry Street has remained a very simple shopping location and hasn't seen a sort of an evolution into other uses in the adjoining streets. We saw opportunities in some of Dublin's unused laneways and streets. The North Lots area in particular, we think is very interesting in terms of how it could provide a very interesting and organic experience for people coming and shopping and visiting the city centre. That's something perhaps to look at in the development plan going forward. There is a pre-existing street hierarchy in Dublin City Centre, Category 1 and Category 2 streets, introduced about 15 years ago, with a view to protecting the sort of the veracity of the retail experience in the key shopping areas. And there's an opportunity for that to be re-looked at, we think, in the development plan, taking account of the reality of what's happened in the last 15 years in terms of competing schemes and the relative stagnation of retail supply in the city centre during the same period. We have a lot of focus on linkages and connectivities. There are fantastic cultural experiences in Dublin that are very closely adjacent to big retail experiences, but the linkages between them maybe need more focus. Key streets like Moser Street, which links to a cultural hub from Grafton Street. We're recommending things like a cost-benefit analysis on the car parking in that street and whether we need to take some of it away and turn it into a much more pedestrian-friendly area. Linking cultural areas like around Dublin Castle to the Grafton Street area in South City markets, and then looking at the key linkages north and south, which is one of the most important linkages in the city. We've got about 2 million square feet of retailing in Henry Street and 1 million in Grafton Street, and linking those together is a very strong pedestrian and interesting journey along Westmoreland Street. Will be very important, we think, for the city going forward. Lastly, we focused on data and communication. Dublin has a fantastically compelling opportunity for retailers, in our view, but it needs to be communicated. The absence of private sector development in this, within the last 15 years in the city means there hasn't been a voice to sell Dublin as a key retailing opportunity to potential international retailers. We think the City Council could have a role in that going forward, connecting up with other organisations like Dublin Bids to really sell Dublin as an opportunity for interesting retailers to come, given its relative wealth and its success in terms of office, students and tourism, as you mentioned before. So I think in summary, we see an opportunity for Dublin as a stronger retail destination and capitalising on its strengths, despite the fact that there's such negativity around the sector in terms of online, that Dublin's inherent advantages in terms of heritage, culture, architecture and history can be capitalised on to make Dublin a successful retail destination over the next 6 years.
Thank you very much, Neil. And a reminder that Neil and Mary's presentations and indeed all of the public consultation webinars will be available on the Dublin City Development Plan website later this week. Now, it's time for our live Q&A session. Taking your questions today are our presenters, Mary McSweeney and Neil Bannon, who you just heard. And joining them on the panel today is Erica Casey, Senior Planner at Dublin City Council. Erica, if I could come to you first, a question that has just come in. What post-COVID measures to help businesses, especially retail businesses in the city centre, are being considered by Dublin City Council and the Economic and Enterprise Department?
Good afternoon, Sinead. I think that's a very interesting question. Obviously, the retail sector has been dramatically impacted on as a result of COVID. And it's also, I suppose, as Neil's presentation pointed out there, has faced a number of other challenges over the last number of years with the growth of online sales and also, I suppose, competition from suburban shopping centres in the outer ring of Dublin around the M50. So I suppose a key question for us for the development plan is how can we ensure the resilience of the city centre and the retail sector going forward post-COVID to ensure, I suppose, the city maintains its primacy as the prime retail destination in the state, and that it maintains that vitality and vibrancy that's so important for a successful city centre. So I suppose we have commissioned the report that Neil mentioned there, I suppose, to look at a whole wide-ranging suite of measures that perhaps we could implement going forward in the development plan. And I certainly would welcome the listeners here today to have a look at that report. It's up on our consultation portal, and to have a look at some of the suggested actions there and give their ideas on how successful they think they might be in terms of implementation. So we're looking at a range of measures, I suppose, particularly to capitalise, I suppose, on the unique selling point of Dublin City Centre, to kind of harness its potential in terms of its cultural attractions, its entertainment facilities, its nighttime economy, and all those range of issues that can feed into the retail sector and providing a broad range and mix of uses. Also, as Neil mentioned there, it's providing capacity for support for retail through the different markets that feed off the retail sector. So again, it's ensuring that we have perhaps better linkages and connection between our office areas, encouraging office workers on their lunch break to come up to the city centre to shop, to spend, to after work in the evenings to come and spend money in the nighttime economy. It's also looking at our tourist attractions. Can we have better synergy between our cultural and our tourist facilities and amenities in the cities and our retail shopping areas, improving connections and permeability and linkages between those facilities. So I suppose it's a whole range of measures, looking at, public realm improvements, linkages, connections, reinforcing certain areas, and also developing those other wider amenities and facilities that support retail in the city and that make the city a place that people want to come and visit and spend time in.
Great stuff. Mary, a question here for you. Should the 50% discount on vacant commercial rates be abolished to encourage occupation and a further vacant property tax imposed to bring back non-performing space?
Well, as Erica has outlined, we're very conscious of what a difficult time that all businesses in the city have been having, and Dublin City Council has been working closely with national initiatives to support businesses. So the initiative around the rates was a national initiative that was supported by Dublin City Council and has made a big difference to the businesses operating in the city in terms of cash flow. A significant amount of funding has flown back from Dublin City Council to businesses under that initiative and others. But I suppose part of what we're looking at here for the consultation is that, any suggestions come in and then they can be considered in greater detail, and to consider, I suppose, the timing of them, because this, while we're in the teeth of COVID at the moment, this plan is going to operate at a strategic level over a lengthier period of time. So to try and analyse, for the longer term, what are the strategies and initiatives that will support an active, lively business community in the city, which is in all of our interest.
Brilliant stuff. One has come in here for Neil. It's kind of more of a comment, I think, than a question, but you might be able to respond. This person says, removing significant car parking out of the centre to create more of a healthy, active, travel orientated and culturally dynamic and attractive destination is genius. Discuss.
I think there is truth in that. And it's interesting, when we talked to some of the retailer representative groups, they actually were not suggesting we keep every car space in the city, which might be what people would assume they would say. One of the key things we're saying in the report is that an appropriate place for car parking to support shopping is at the edge of the retail core. So people can come into the edge of the retail core, park, get out of their cars, and then walk through a very pedestrian-friendly environment when they're within that retail core. So I think you've got to acknowledge that you need to get suburban shoppers into the city, and they have alternatives outside the city which are car-based, but you shouldn't have people driving through the city. They should be driving to the city, getting out of their cars, getting out of the public transport, whatever the format they take, and then being very comfortable in terms of how they walk through the city and enjoy it with their friends and family, because you don't want a conflict between cars and consumers. One of the key recommendations of the report, for instance, is the linkage between the north and south retail cores along Westmoreland Street, which has been largely got rid of the car transport, but there's an awful lot of road there that could then be capitalised for more pedestrian-friendly locations. And we also recommend as I referred to in the presentation, the cost-benefit analysis. If you've got a street that has 4 car spaces on it, the revenue generated from those car spaces relative to the environment that could be created by the removal, I think is worth looking at, because if someone knows there's a car space in that street, then they might spend a lot of time driving in the city to look for that car space. And if they know it's not there, then they won't do that. So I think there are very small interventions that could have a big difference there.
Okay. Erica, a question here for you. How is Dublin City Council planning to support the development of arts and culture facilities and organisations in the city?
Again, I suppose there's a very clear recognition of the role of arts and culture in our city. And arts and culture covers a very diverse range of uses, from nightclubs down to theatres, down to performance spaces. And it's recognised that they play an essential part both of our nighttime economy. And again, also, as I said, that create that synergy of uses that attracts people into the city centre and ensures the vitality and the vibrancy of that. In the next development plan, I suppose we are looking at what measures we can have to continue to support that sector. How we can protect and preserve cultural facilities of value to the city and to ensure that they are retained, or that if a site is redeveloped that contains a cultural facility of note, that somehow is replaced as part of the redevelopment proposal. And we've seen, some very successful examples that of the city. For example, in the Screen Cinema site, it was part of the LAP for that area that a new entertainment or cultural facility had to replace that use. So trying to ensure that land uses like that aren't lost when sites are redeveloped. So again, we're looking at all of those issues. We're also, I suppose, looking at our new regeneration areas across the city and how we can meaningfully include arts and cultural facilities and spaces in those in a way that will serve the new communities that are locating there. We are, in a similar way to which we commissioned the Bannon report, we do have consultants engaged to do a specialist piece of research for us on this area, looking at arts and culture in the city, and we certainly will be feeding the outcomes of that study and analysis into the new development plan. But it's certainly an issue that we're taking very seriously, and something that we're looking at in detail for the next plan. But again, as I said before, certainly would welcome any ideas, suggestions or feedback from people here today watching the presentation on how we can continue to import that sector, which is so important to the city.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions coming in on the nighttime economy. Some of them here, Mary, perhaps you could take some of these. Two questions here. First of all, what is the role of the nighttime economy in creating, a vibrant city centre? And also, how can the arts or culture uses as distinct from physical buildings be protected in this nighttime economy?
Thanks, Sinead. The nighttime economy is an area we've been giving a lot of thought to. There's a national task force that is looking at the nighttime economy, and our Lord Mayor Hazel Chu is part of that task force. We also have a working group that is looking at other international experience. But we started by using our Your Dublin, Your Voice survey to just find out more about what people based in Dublin, their level of interest. And we found that 90% of people agree that, the evening or nighttime economy is important to the overall city economy. But there was also a high percentage of people who felt that our offering was not as good as other comparable international cities. But part of the debate links to the second question about, how do we ensure that the nighttime economy, is varied and that there's a cultural offering. So we've been learning a lot about the approach that other cities have taken, and it's interesting how, the approach a lot of cities are taking is that if a good city during the day, it can be a good city during the night. But some of the aspects to that is ensuring good quality transport, good safety. And one of the trends that we're seeing is the support for hyper-local. And I think, in some of Neil's comments too about, how we support retail, but we want that unique offering. We want things that are unique to Dublin. So culture and arts, I think, can play a really significant role there and need to be very much supported as part of our further development of nighttime economy, and to ensure too that there's, quality employment so that the people working in our nighttime economy are supported in what they do. So they're all factors that are being examined at the moment and will all form part of the consultation around the new plan.
Just to add to that, you look at one of the most diverse parts of Dublin's retail economy, the South City Markets area of Grafton Street, which is a real overlap of interesting retail experiences, nighttime economy that feeds into daytime experiences, and is a real hub for the city. And one of the things we've identified in the report is that it's a key difference between Grafton Street and Henry Street areas, where Henry Street is very monothematic in terms of retail, where Grafton Street bleeds into different parts of the day much more comfortably, and that's something that we've recommended be looked at in terms of the development plan going forward, and how we can get that depth of experience on the north side of the city as well.
Question here for Erica. What is DCC's view in relation to planning permission for temporary or pop-up uses in the immediate aftermath of COVID to help occupy vacant units? I think that what this person means is pop-up shops, I presume, retail.
I think, obviously, when you have a high street or a main street or a shopping street that has a high degree of vacancy, it can be very visually unattractive, and, can give a kind of a sense of, I suppose, dereliction and despair. So pop-up uses can be used quite effectively as a means to kind of reanimate a street and activate a street. We do, I think, in the current plan have a policy regarding temporary pop-up uses, and certainly we've seen some great innovative examples of pop-up uses in the city. Pop-up restaurants, for example, there was a trend a couple of years ago where somebody could come in and use a space maybe to test bed an idea for innovation for a new restaurant concept or a new retail concept, and it can form a very useful function that way. So I think it's something certainly we would support, and I think as long as it's of decent quality, and particularly if it's something innovative, it can be a very useful way to, I suppose, get over maybe a temporary vacancy issue in a prime retail area.
Neil, a question here for you. How can large vacant spaces in the city, such as Debenhams, be successfully repurposed and developed?
The playbook is probably already there. We've seen it with Clear's redevelopment, which is underway, where we've seen the large department store being split into what we call MSUs, medium-sized units, and then there's, I think, hotel and offices sitting above that. We saw this from the previous Debenhams store in Jervis Street. If you remember, there was Debenhams there that we got split into larger retailer occupancy, and probably anticipate something similar happening with the Debenhams store in Henry Street. And we did a report to City Council 15 years ago, and one of the things we identified was the lack of these medium-sized units, because it's very hard to get large retail boxes that fit the likes of Apple stores and Zara's and H&M's into a historic city like Dublin, because it's hard to combine units. So it has actually come about through the splitting up of the larger boxes into the smaller spaces for those retailers. And I think that's it's filling a gap in the retail market that's there. So I think that will happen quite quickly, and has happened already now with 2 of the department stores in Dublin. And it fits with the trend internationally in terms of how we've seen department stores evolve into smaller retail operators.
Erica, there's 2 questions coming in here in relation to COVID. The first one is, what is the future for office development in the city? With home working becoming more long-term for many people, and the pending legislation on remote working, what do you think is the future for office development in the city? And then related to that is another separate question, but how quickly could we change the use from commercial to residential of premises where it's clear that it will never become economically productive again as a shop?
I suppose there's been a seismic change in the way we work in the last couple of months as a result of COVID, and the long-term legacy, what the long-term legacy of that will be, remains to be seen. I think there's certainly an acknowledgement by both employers and employees of the huge benefits that home working can bring in terms of quality of life and flexibility for staff. But I think it's also recognised that it has shortfalls, particularly in terms of collaboration and training and mentoring. So I suppose in that context, I don't think we're going to see the complete demise of office accommodation post-COVID. I think Dublin still remains a very attractive location for businesses to locate, to invest in. We consistently rank very highly in kind of international rankings, as Mary's presentation showed, as a place to do business in. So I think that trend is going to continue with a very young, dynamic and educated workforce. And there's also potentially going to be opportunities, post-Brexit, from companies potentially reinvesting investing in Dublin. So I don't think we're going to see offices disappear. I think what we might see is, I suppose, changing demands for the types of office spaces that we have in our city. There may be less of a demand for the larger kind of, very large floor plate HQ type offices, maybe a demand for smaller or more flexible type office spaces. And there may also be a demand for offices in different locations of the city. We might see a drive for to maybe more suburban locations. And I suppose a question that maybe we should be asking is there a need for more suburban co-working or digital hub type spaces? And I mean, they're the types of issues that we're asking the public's views on, in terms of what way might this pan out and how should we plan for that in the plan. In terms of changing use, I mean, I don't think it's a straightforward question. If there's an existing office block, there can be challenges to its conversion to residential use in terms of, I suppose, meeting the standards that we would require for residential development. We do have national guidelines in terms of how apartments should be designed and developed in terms of minimum floor areas, balconies, open space, etc. So, it can be quite challenging to reconfigure an office block or an office floor plate into residential use. But again, there are innovative examples of where that can be done and can be achieved depending on the typology of the office block or the location. And again, there are good examples of that. So I think it would very much depend on the site-specific circumstance. It's too difficult maybe to comment on that in a generalised way.
So there was part of that question suggesting that a shop might be converted into residential. Just, I suppose, maybe to put to bed one misconception about that might be out there about Dublin, that we're not overshopped in Dublin city centre in our view. Like we had very low vacancy levels pre-COVID. We have not had a major increase in retail supply in Dublin city centre for almost 20 years. So, but there isn't a surplus of shops as the vacancy rate would have indicated prior to COVID, and we don't anticipate, once we get over the devastating impact COVID is having on retail, once we get over that, we anticipate going back to full occupancy again. It's very painful at the moment, but there shouldn't be a view, I think, that we're going to see a large delinquency in retail in Dublin city centre.
And Neil, that kind of brings us on to another question that's coming here. Do we have too many hotels, offices and student accommodation developments in our city? Question in here.
I think, well, the guys might have a view on this as well, but I think what our report talks about is 4 constituents of people who make up shoppers in the city. So there's the people who live in the city and around the city in terms of the residents. There's tourists, there's students, and there's office workers. And I think to the points that Mary and Erica were making earlier, it's important that for the health and vitality of retail in the city, that anyone who forms any part of those constituencies engages with the retail within the city. It's easy for an office worker or a tourist or a student or a resident to engage with the city centre's retail experience. And I think the depth of experience and depth of offer that we have in the city is contingent upon having spend from those 4 categories. The more spend we put in from tourists, the more interesting retail we'll have, the more interesting it'll be for residents, and the more they want to come into the city and not stay in suburban schemes. So I wouldn't underestimate the positive impact that those spend would bring in creating a place that people might want to live and spend time in, or might want to not stay in remote working and come into the city and work in their office. So they're all important aspects of the city's underlying retail offer. And you remove any of them, you'll have a damaging impact. So I would, it's not a negative thing to have tourists coming and spending money in the city from a retail perspective.
I think just to add to that, Neil, I mean, 2 points I'd like to highlight. I mean, firstly, I suppose in terms of tourism, some of the stats that we've highlighted in our issues paper is that Dublin received over 6 million tourists in 2019. So it's a huge sector for the city in terms of the city economy, and that has significant spin-off benefits in terms of, spend, in our shops, in our restaurants, our food and beverage sector, our cultural attractions. And it's also a huge employer. So we do need to accommodate tourists and provide them with high quality accommodation options, because if we don't, tourists will then revert to using other options like short-term lettings, for example, that should be in the housing stock. So it's about providing viable and sufficient accommodation to meet the needs of tourists coming into the city. Also, Dublin, it's a world capital, so we have a lot of other events that happen that are very important to the city. Our conferencing sector, our major music events, sporting events that also attract lots of people into the city. So we do need to have hotels and accommodation to serve those people. And the same with student accommodation. And again, I suppose there has been a huge, we have seen a big increase in purpose-built student accommodation in Dublin over the last few years, but that was after decades of absolutely no investment in that sector. You know, we've had generations of students living in very miserable bedsit and poor standard housing, you know. So purpose-built student accommodation again provides a viable alternative. The report done by government in 2017 estimated that there was a need for nearly 28,000 bed spaces to meet the needs of students in our city going forward. We're nowhere actually near that level, even though they might seem that we've granted a lot of student accommodation. So again, it's important that we do provide viable, safe and secure housing for our student population. And again, that will enable housing stock that has been used by students historically to come back into the market and to be used for families and for longer term communities and residents. So I think they're just two important factors to consider when we talk about too much hotel or too much student accommodation. They are both important elements of providing a balanced approach to accommodation typologies across the city.
I might just add a small comment there, Sinead. Tourism is a very vital sector to our economy in Dublin, and 1 in 10 jobs is related to tourism. But again, similar to what Eric was saying about the report on the lack of student accommodation, Fáilte Ireland did a report that looked at the lack of hotel accommodation. And at the time, the hotels in Dublin had some of the highest occupancy rates in Europe. So while I suppose we're experiencing a real devastation of our tourism industry at the moment with COVID, we are hopeful that the economy will recover and that the supply that's there will meet the growing demand. But again, it's to get that balance between keeping the city a place where the residents can enjoy all that's on offer and also the visitors. So sustainable tourism, would be part of what we'd be looking to pursue as part of this plan, and look forward to any submissions relating to that.
Great stuff. We've just time for one or two more questions. Mary, question here for you. What is Dublin City Council doing to potentialise our financial district post-Brexit? This is a huge opportunity for us, this person says.
Well, as some of the comments earlier, I suppose one of the strengths of the Dublin economy is in relation to our financial services, and a lot of that is located in the Docklands and the financial services centres that is based there. Again, with global shocks and changes, Brexit would have provided an opportunity to Dublin to present itself as a great location for financial services. And we've worked closely with the national agencies such as the IDA, who have worked to attract financial investment to Ireland, and a lot of that has located in Dublin. So again, it's part of just that broader supportive environment of an attractive place to live and work, because these decisions are made on a range of factors, not just the financial environment, but also the quality of life on offer to the workers who may be looking at a number of cities that would be competing in relation to the final decision on that. So a lot of work has gone in, and Dublin has done very well in competing, and a lot of the decisions were made on the move of financial sectors, and our central bank would have assessed hundreds of applications from financial services looking to relocate here to Dublin.
Great stuff. Mary, we'll leave you with the last word, final question in here. Foreign direct investment doesn't just focus on tax incentives to locate here. Soft location factors like lifestyle, culture, educational facilities are key. How will the City Development Plan address this?
Well, again, we work closely with the IDA, and while the entire operating environment is part of the factors, I think one of the strengths of our foreign direct investment is that these are not short-term decisions. A lot of the foreign direct investment that located here 20 years ago is still here and is expanding its footprint in Dublin. So despite the fact that, we have a higher cost of living in Dublin, which is one of the challenges and competitive factors we need to watch and try and manage, the FDI that has located here has found it to be a very strong location. And even in our economy throughout the COVID period, the performance of a lot of the foreign direct investment companies has been strong even throughout COVID, which is quite remarkable looking across the entire European economy. I think the connectedness of the city, the quality of the talent, and we do have a small, compact city, and I think that adds a lot, not just in how people move about, but how people support each other, talk to each other, and the clustering of a lot of the locations where our FDI has located. So I think all of these are factors that will remain strong for the city going forward.
Brilliant stuff. Well, that brings us to the end of our webinar. My thanks to all of our speakers here today, and of course to you for your participation. A reminder again that you have until February 22nd to make your submission and have your say on the future development of the city. You can do so online or by post. You can log on to dublincitydevelopmentplan.ie, read the strategic issues paper and all of its key topics and make a submission. Or you can have your say by post by writing to the address seen there on screen. And a reminder as well that all of the public consultation webinars held this week will be available to watch back on the Dublin City Development Plan website by the end of this week. I'll leave you now with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, who once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." Your city matters. Your views matter. So don't be silent. Make a submission and help to shape the development of our capital city for future generations. Thank you for watching and take care.